How's it going, guys? It's me, Jay, and welcome back to the 18th installment of my series, going through each and every WrestleMania on the road to WrestleMania 41. Now we're in 2002. We're at WrestleMania 18, taking place on St. Patrick's Day, March 17th, 2002. And this one, like I said, one for the ages. It's iconic. It's icon versus icon. What is the storyline going into this? Well, as we talked about in the last video, Vince McMahon has purchased WCW. WCW is no more. It went out of business. But he didn't get the big WCW stars because their contracts were part of the Time Warner family and not WCW. But now those contracts are up. The first to come over is Ric Flair, who declares himself the co-owner of the WWF and challenges Vince McMahon to a street fight at the Royal Rumble. And the winner will determine if Ric Flair stays the owner of the WWF. And they have this street fight. So 10 years after Ric Flair's historic Royal Rumble win at the Royal Rumble 1992, here in 2002, he defeats Vince McMahon. But what does this prompt Vince to do? Now Vince, he wants to get back to WWF, but he can't. So the only thing he can do is to destroy the WWF from within with, as he puts it, a lethal dose of poison. So one promo on SmackDown, he's sitting behind a chair. He says, I'm going to inject the WWF with a lethal dose of poison. And the poison is the NWO. And behind his chair are the letters the NWO. So it's an indication that the NWO, the New World Order, are coming to the World Wrestling Federation, which is a crazy thing to think of if you were a fan my age. I was 17 at this point in my life, growing up a lifelong WWF and pro wrestling fan. I'd seen the Monday Night Wars. I saw them unfold. I saw Scott Hall jump to WCW and form the NWO. I saw Hulk Hogan turn heel. I saw 83 weeks in a row WCW beat WWE in the ratings. I remember when David says he was 10 in 2002. Yeah, I'm a little older than you than you are, David. But it's cool. We're friends. I saw it all. I saw it all unfold. So it was crazy to think. I remember when fans thought that the NWO, the Invasion of the Outsiders, was Vince McMahon sending Scott Hall and Kevin Nash to WCW to infiltrate WCW. So it's crazy to think that they were coming to the WWF. And not only that, the other crazy part was that Hulk Hogan was coming back to the WWF after 9 years of being gone. We remember the first series, the first 9 videos in our series were featured Hulk Hogan. It wasn't up until WrestleMania 10, David. They've been following us since the beginning. It wasn't until WrestleMania 10 that we stopped talking about Hulk Hogan in relation to WrestleMania because he was no longer there. The first 9 WrestleManias featured him. The last time we saw him on WWF TV, period, was in June of 1993. I was 8 years old. This is 10. This is going on 10 years later, and now I'm a grown adult. I'm an 11th grader in high school. You know what I mean? So Hogan had been gone for years, and like I said in the last video, wrestling years are different than real years. Real years are only 5 years. Right, David saying Hulk Hogan versus The Rock was a great match. Real years are only 5. I agree, David. Real years are only 5 years, but wrestling years, 5 years could be 50 years. For example, look at now. Look where we were 5 years ago, and look where we are now. Wrestling years don't move by as fast now as they used to be. But take, for example, where WWE was in 1990 versus where they were in 1995. A completely different roster. So this is a completely different roster that Hulk Hogan is entering into. Kevin Nash too. We hadn't talked about Kevin Nash in the WrestleMania series since WrestleMania 12. We haven't talked about Scott Hall in the WrestleMania series since WrestleMania 11. So these guys were legends coming back. This was my childhood coming back to the WWF. So I was loving every minute of it. And I was a huge NWO mark growing up. My friend Sean and my friend Pito used to be our mini version of the NWO in junior high school. We got in trouble for being too into the NWO at that time. So I'm loving this. For the first time ever, I watched No Way Out. I ordered the pay-per-view just to see them come, and they do a promo basically where they declare that they're just fans like everybody else, and they were given the opportunity by Vince McMahon to come back to the WWF, and they have encounters with the main stars of the Attitude Era, mostly The Rock and Stone Cold Steve Austin. The interaction with The Rock was funny because The Rock has a match at No Way Out with The Undertaker, and they pass by The Rock, and Hulk Hogan goes, "The Rock, that's my son's favorite wrestler. Let me get a picture." He says, "No problem, a picture for your son." And then, and then, basically, behind his back, Hogan's calling him a jabroni, and then Rock overhears it. Rock's like, "Oh, wait a minute, I was kind enough to give you a picture for your son." And then he proceeds to berate and reference their old gimmicks. Chico, Razor Ramon. He says, you know what you can do with that camera, Hulk Hogan? You can shine it up real nice and stick it straight up your candy ass. So he dresses down the NWO. And then with Stone Cold Steve Austin, the NWO offer him a case of beer. He's about to go out for his match with Chris Jericho. They offer him a case of beer. He refuses. He says, "You heard I like to drink beer? I heard you like to drink a lot of beer." And then he throws the beer over his shoulder, which is a wink and a nod because we all knew at that time that Scott Hall had his troubles with alcoholism. But he promised to behave, when he came back, which didn't last very long, but we'll talk about that. And they interfere in Jericho's behalf, allowing Jericho to retain the Undisputed Championship. And that's the beginning of Austin and Rock's feud with the NWO. Now, originally, the plan was to have Stone Cold Steve Austin versus Hulk Hogan, because the biggest star of the previous era versus the biggest star of this era. And that's how they set it up initially. But Austin didn't want to do the job. He didn't like Hogan from their time together in WCW. Remember, Hogan didn't want to work with him, refused to work with him, and one of the main reasons why Austin got fired from that company. So that wasn't going to happen. So they pivoted. They had the second biggest star of the Attitude Era, and arguably the bigger star, because by that point, Austin had been out the entire year of 2000. And The Rock was a crossover movie star, Saturday Night Live, The Scorpion King, all this sort of stuff. He was in many ways bigger than Stone Cold Steve Austin, but diehard fans like me still wanted to see Austin versus Hogan. It's a shame we never got it. But the night after No Way Out, Hogan comes out, cuts a promo, says that the WWF fans turned their backs on him. He did everything for the WWF. He basically built the WWF. And then The Rock, there has never been a bigger star ever in the history of professional wrestling other than me. And The Rock's music hits. And The Rock comes out and says, and this is in Chicago, The Rock comes out and says, no, these people loved you. These people believed in you. Damn it, The Rock believed in you. But it was years after years of you ripping your t-shirt off, years after years of you telling the fans to say their prayers and take their vitamins. And you know what the people did? They got tired. They went to the bathroom and they took one big hawk of crap every time you open your mouth. And he says, you talk about headlining WrestleMania after WrestleMania. Well, how would you like to headline one more WrestleMania with The Rock? And then they're face to face. Two of the biggest icons in professional wrestling. Like Jerry Lawler and Jim Ross said in the commentary for this show. It's like Babe Ruth and Barry Bonds, Muhammad Ali or Mike Tyson. Two eras colliding. It was epic. And then The Rock gives Hogan a rock bottom. Rock is then attacked by the NWO, stuffed inside an ambulance where they run him over with a truck. And they like, and Hogan's overheard saying, "Let's lay the smackdown on his crippled ass." You know? So that's basically the build. But this match doesn't need much build. This match builds itself. You know, it's like Hogan Warrior. You didn't need a lot of build for Hogan Warrior. The match build itself. This is Hulk Hogan versus The Rock. Two of the biggest mainstream stars in wrestling. But what's Stone Cold Steve Austin doing? Since he's not wrestling Hulk Hogan, he has to be doing something. Well, his feud is with Scott Hall. Now, this feud with Scott Hall, this does need a lot of build because Scott Hall would not have been my first choice. My first choice would have been Kevin Nash. Kevin Nash versus Stone Cold Steve Austin would have been better, but they go with Scott Hall, and it has some entertaining, little segments. Hall gets kidnapped and stuffed into a closet. They spray paint what on the NWO's car. Stone Cold Steve Austin spray paints what on the NWO's car. He shoots out a net gun at Scott Hall, and Kevin Nash, in a reference back to Pillman's Got a Gun, yells out, "He's got a gun! He's got a gun!" But it's a net gun, and they catch the Outsiders and the NWO in the net. But really underwhelming this feud, and this was not the perfect feud for Scott Hall to be in because, like I said, he had his real life struggles with alcoholism, and Stone Cold Steve Austin's gimmick is beer. So on one segment, Stone Cold Steve Austin pours beer all over Scott Hall. And Scott Hall is taking a drug called Antabuse at this time, which basically if you drink alcohol and you take this, you throw up violently. You know what I mean? And that one segment where Austin pours beer all over Scott Hall, that triggers Scott Hall. And inevitably it would end in Scott Hall falling prey to his addictions and the NWO angle not lasting all that long. It was plagued from the beginning, the NWO angle in the WWF. So those are the two matches. But one particular match that it was in the Go Home show of WrestleMania 18. It was a handicap match. It was the NWO, Hulk Hogan, Scott Hall, and Kevin Nash against Stone Cold Steve Austin and The Rock. And this was the only time that we ever got to see Stone Cold Steve Austin have at least a little interaction with Hulk Hogan. This match itself, this was the Monday Night Wars in a nutshell, guys. This match itself could have been a pay-per-view match, but unfortunately it was a Raw match. And the NWO won, but going into the pay-per-view, now Hulk Hogan, he's returning to the Toronto Sky Dome. for the first time since 1990. The same building that he lost to the Ultimate Warrior in, he is now facing The Rock. And Toronto loves Hulk Hogan. You know what I mean? 1986, we go back to Hogan versus Paul Orndorff. Toronto is Hogan's town, and plus WWF fans are really nostalgic to see Hulk Hogan back in the company that he created. So The Rock is a baby face in this. He goes in as a face. But in mid-match, the fans start cheering for Hulk Hogan. So they switch places. In mid-match, they switch places, and The Rock starts working heel. Hogan hulks up. He hits Rock with a leg drop, right? Rock jumps up, and the iconic call from Jim Ross. He beat Andre the Giant with that move. When Hogan hawked up, every kid that was over the age of 10 was 10 again. He was 8 again. I was a kid again. Hogan doing this, like it was legendary, man. It was stuff of legend. And Hogan, before the match, he told the NWO, he said, "Stay in the back because I need to know if I can do it by myself." And ultimately, The Rock wins. And at the end of the match, Hogan and The Rock shake hands. And the NWO doesn't like this. And they come out, they attack Hulk Hogan. And Hulk Hogan and The Rock both beat up the NWO. And Hulk Hogan is a babyface. And the only thing that would have made this moment better, in my opinion, would have been to have Real American play on the loudspeaker. Hulk Hogan's classic theme from the golden era of the WWF play on the loudspeaker as Hogan and The Rock pose. Because Hogan's leaving the ring, The Rock gestures to him, to do his ear thing and to do his pose down, and he comes back and he does it, and fans just lose their mind, man. But Voodoo Child plays, not Real American. But if Real American would have played, man, the place would have went crazy. As far as the Scott Hall and Stone Cold Steve Austin match, Stone Cold Steve Austin wins, taking on basically two wrestlers with Kevin Nash in Scott Hall's corner. And the way Scott Hall sold the stunner was, Scott Hall sells the stunner one of the best. He's one of the best sellers of the stunner. He bounces in midair. But we only see Kevin Nash as a cornerman. You know what I mean? Like, Kevin Nash doesn't have a match. Like I said, WrestleMania 12 was his last match in the WrestleMania series. It's sad he didn't have a match. He could have probably, if this person wasn't in the WWF in the world title match on this same show, he could have wrestled Triple H. Now, speaking of Triple H, Triple H has returned in the early part of February of this year. He comes back from an injury. It's a Madison Square Garden show. He's the first return. The early part of January. He's the first return of the year. And he's back as one of the biggest baby faces. Keep in mind, he left as a heel, but now he's a baby face. Fans are cheering him. He's going on to declare his intentions to win a Royal Rumble, which he does. Triple H is your 2002 Royal Rumble winner, and he will take on Chris Jericho, one of the men who put him out of action. But what about his wife, Stephanie McMahon? Now they don't seem to be on the same page. Stephanie McMahon is still a heel, and Triple H is a huge baby face. So Stephanie McMahon wants to renew her vows, basically. So, and Triple H is not interested. He's like, God, the hell with that. So she devises a plan. She tells Triple H, she says, I'm pregnant, right? So Triple H feels safe that she's pregnant. So they have to have the wedding on Raw. Linda McMahon throws a monkey wrench in that, She reveals to Triple H that the doctor that declared Stephanie McMahon pregnant is actually an actor, and Stephanie McMahon was never pregnant. Now, this was the crimped era where Stephanie had, crimped hair. She was looking super hot, back then, but it doesn't matter to Triple H. On the wedding, when it's revealed, he comes out and he calls Stephanie a stupid bitch. He pedigrees Vince. He pedigrees, and Stephanie McMahon declares her intention to stand in Chris Jericho's corner. They have a fight over their dog. He destroys the Corvette he brought her. Man, Triple H is on fire. Going into WrestleMania. What other matches? Well, Ric Flair will be wrestling here. Ric Flair will fall victim to the streak because now The Undertaker's a heel now. He's the hired henchman of Vince McMahon. And Vince McMahon still has beef with Ric Flair, so he sends The Undertaker out to destroy Ric Flair. And Undertaker even destroys Ric Flair's son, David, in a match. They're thinking about bringing David Flair into the WWF. They ultimately don't. And the match between Ric Flair and The Undertaker is pretty good. Arn Anderson interferes, giving The Undertaker a spine buster. Good stuff. What other matches are on this show? Rikishi, Scotty 2 Hotty, and Albert defeat Mr. Perfect, Lance Storm, and Test. Yes, Mr. Perfect is back. He returned at the Royal Rumble 2002. Goldust did as well. Mr. Perfect had a match with Stone Cold Steve Austin on Raw where the NWO came out and broke a cinder block on Austin's leg. Rob Van Dam defeats William Regal. Diamond Dallas Page, the European champion. Now, Diamond Dallas Page is back now. He's no longer the stalker. He's now Positively Page, where he's going around smiling with pearly white teeth. But he is back. The last time he was in this arena, he was driving the Honky Tonk Man's pink Cadillac coming out during WrestleMania 6. Now he's back wrestling Christian in a match that he wins for the European Championship. Maven, the guy that eliminated The Undertaker at the Royal Rumble that year, the contestant for Tough Enough, Maven Huffman, he's the champion. He takes on Goldust. And then Spike Dudley pins him. The Intercontinental Championship, the Hardcore Championship changes hands so many times during this pay-per-view. Kurt Angle versus Kane, a pretty decent match. Edge versus Booker T, the stupid thing about hair shampoo. Commercial. Billy Gunn and Chuck Palumbo, they take on the APA, the Dudley Boys, with Stacy Keibler and the Hardy Boys. Pretty decent Four Corners match. The Rock defeats Hulk Hogan. We talked about that. Jazz, the Women's Champion, defeats Trish Stratus and Lita. And Triple H ends WrestleMania 18 as the undisputed champion, holding up both belts, the World Heavyweight Championship as well as the WWE Championship. And that's the end of WrestleMania 18. What an iconic WrestleMania. But what happens after this? Well, Hulk Hogan goes on a nostalgia tour. After WrestleMania, The Rock comes out and says, "Only one problem, Hulk. You're still wearing your black and white NWO." So Hogan goes back to the red and yellow. And fans are so ecstatic about this that the newly crowned the newly crowned undisputed champion Triple H uh, loses a match to Hogan at um, at Backlash 2002. Hulk Hogan becomes the WWF champion for the sixth time. That's how nostalgic fans are for the Hulkster. And actually becomes the last WWF champion. What do I mean by that? Well, it's pretty soon, thanks to a lawsuit from the World Wildlife Fund, Vince McMahon will be forced to change the name of the WWF. Since 1979, the company had been known as the WWF. Um, it was originally the WWF from 1963 to 1979, and before that, from 1952 to 1963, it was known as the Capital Wrestling Corporation. But now, here in 2002, because of this lawsuit, they have to change the name again. So they get the F out and they start to call the company the WWE, which is what it's known as today. So in 2002, the company changed its name from the WWF to the WWE. And I remember watching, because after WrestleMania, I usually, like in my adult years, like from this point on, I would usually take a break after WrestleMania. I do it every year. I take a break. I don't really watch from week to week, like I did when I was a real little kid during the Monday Night Wars era. So I remember taking a break and then seeing a broadcast where there's an E there. And I'm like, wait a minute, the WW on the logo. I'm like, the WWE? What happened to the old WWF? So they do this whole campaign of get the F out. And we're in a new era. And also pretty soon, due to lack of competition, they have this idea of a brand split, splitting the two companies. The company into two brands because Vince McMahon and Ric Flair are still feuding. So storyline wise, Ric Flair will get one brand and Vince McMahon will get another brand. That ultimately doesn't work out. We'll see later on in 2002 how that goes to bust. So they hire general managers, which end up being Eric Bischoff and Stephanie McMahon. But 2002 is a very crazy year, man, in the company because Eddie Guerrero comes back, Hulk Hogan comes back, Scott Hall comes back, Kevin Nash comes back, and Shawn Michaels ultimately also comes back. Because what with Hulk Hogan as a babyface, Scott Hall fired, they have to reform the NWO in some sort of way. So they recruit the Big Show, they recruit Booker T, but NWO needs a leader. So on one episode of Raw, Kevin Nash comes out and he introduces Shawn Michaels. So Shawn Michaels then becomes the new leader of the NWO. And they do the thing that they used to do when they were a tag team together back in the days, like in 94, 95, where Michaels jumps up and gives Nash a high five. And then then Nash and Shawn Michaels kick out Booker T out of the NWO. So now Booker T and his partner Goldust, and that begins a whole new era for Booker T, start to go against the NWO. Pretty soon they're kicking out the Big Show, and the only ones left is Sean Waltman, X-Pac, and Kevin Nash and Shawn Michaels. But they're doing this storyline where they're offering Triple H a chance to join the NWO because before, like Shawn Michaels said, before there was an NWO, there was the Click. This symbol. So will he take it? No. There was a segment where he's coming out of his locker room. He looks at Kevin Nash. He looks at Shawn Michaels, and he says, "It's good to see you." And they hug. But ultimately it's not to come to fruition because in a July episode of Monday Night Raw, Vince McMahon comes out and he into the NWO's music, and he says, "You've heard the NWO music for the very last time." He says the NWO era is now history, just as many other preceding eras are also history. And he goes through the various eras of WWE history: Bruno Sammartino, Pedro Morales, all these other eras that we've talked about, on this series. And he says that a new era is beginning and that two general managers will be introduced. And one of the general managers is, ironically, Eric Bischoff. Now, hell froze over during this because nobody ever thought that they would see Eric Bischoff, the man who tried to put the WWE out of business and was successful in defeating Vince McMahon in the ratings for 83 weeks. Nobody would ever thought they would see that. So Booker T is doing an interview, and Eric Bischoff walks by Booker T, and Booker T says, "Tell me that I did not just see that." And the shocked look on Booker T's face. And Vince McMahon says, "It takes a real son of a bitch to be successful in this business, and I give it up to Eric Bischoff." And Eric Bischoff comes out, he hugs Vince McMahon. Man, it was surreal, man. And Stephanie McMahon is named as the general manager of SmackDown. Now, initially, when they do the brand split, the champion could appear on both brands, and the champion is first Hulk Hogan, then the Undertaker defeats him, and then The Rock defeats the Undertaker. But at SummerSlam 2002, a new sensation has come onto the scene. Paul Heyman is no longer in charge of the alliance anymore because there is no more alliance. He has introduced a new person to the wrestling scene, Brock Lesnar, a former NCAA wrestling champion from Minnesota, trained by Brad Riggins. This guy is a genetic beast. He comes out and he attacks Spike Dudley right out of the audience, and he starts blowing through the competition in the WWE. He completely decimates Hulk Hogan on an episode of SmackDown, taking Hulk Hogan out of commission for several months. Actually, what happened was Hogan walked out of the company because he wanted to do this big program with Brock, and WWE just didn't see that for him. So he just decided, you know what, I'm taking my ball and going home. Another person that took their ball and went home because WWE decided that they wanted to do a match with him, and him to lose a qualifying match on King of the Ring, just out of nowhere, a random qualifying match with Stone Cold Steve Austin. He took his ball and went home, and WWE made a big deal of it. They had The Rock coming out denouncing him, saying that The Rock would never do that. And it seemed like Austin was going to leave the company, but hell, where was he going to go? There was no other viable option. So both Hulk Hogan and Stone Cold Steve Austin are out of the company now, and Brock Lesnar's running through everybody. So in one of the best match builds I've ever seen, Nassau Coliseum, The Rock defeats. Brock Lesnar defeats The Rock, becoming the youngest WWE champion in history. And just like in the Hogan match, the fans turn on The Rock. Initially, The Rock came in as a babyface, and Brock Lesnar as a heel, but the fans start cheering Brock Lesnar. And also in 2002, after the NWO breaks up, and the lead up to SummerSlam 2002, after the NWO breaks up, you think that DX is going to get back together. Triple H and Shawn Michaels, right? They come out together to DX music, but no. Triple H turns on Shawn Michaels and turns heel. So now Shawn Michaels will be returning to the ring. An unsanctioned match at SummerSlam 2002, where Shawn Michaels will take on his former DX partner, Triple H, and this is a hell of a match. Like this is a spectacular fucking match, man. And also, the concept of the Elimination Chamber is introduced at Survivor Series, resulting in Shawn Michaels becoming the World Heavyweight Champion. Now, what is the World Heavyweight Championship? Well, like I said, Brock Lesnar is the undisputed champion after SummerSlam, and he decides to sign an exclusive contract with SmackDown, meaning that Raw has no champion. So Eric Bischoff basically comes out and brings back the big gold belt and gives it to Triple H, and Triple H is now the first World Heavyweight Champion in the WWE lineage of that big gold belt title. And increasingly, Ric Flair and Triple H are becoming friends, and pretty soon they will form a faction known as Evolution. In the ashes of the NWO, Evolution is born. Because this is the beginning of the ruthless aggression era, yet another era in the history of the WWE. Vince McMahon gives a rousing speech to the roster, telling them they have ruthless aggression. And Kurt Angle comes out and challenges a random person to a match. And who comes out and accepts this challenge? The former prototype from OVW, who will become John Cena. So, and Randy Orton is also introduced in 2002. The graduating class of 2002 is a spectacular class, guys. It includes Batista, Randy Orton, and John Cena, guys that we will be talking about in some of the next installments coming up here on the WrestleMania series. Things are really starting to change in 2002 for the WWE. Unfortunately, like I said, the NWO angle was a bust. In a 10-man tag, Kevin Nash tore his quad. And Scott Hall was fired because of the incidents of the plane ride from hell. Plane ride from hell is infamous. It is a famous flight from Europe to the United States on a private jet that the WWE had. There you had Goldust singing to his wife. You had Brock Lesnar and Kurt Hennig wrestling in the cockpit. You had Scott Hall passed out drunk, and you had Ric Flair harassing stewardesses. And pretty much nobody was punished for this except Scott Hall and Kurt Hennig, Mr. Perfect, who were let go. And Scott Hall would not be back in WWE until many, many years later, and would not appear on the WrestleMania series again until 2015. When we talk about the NWO's angle in the rest at WrestleMania 31, so that's pretty much the end of the NWO and the end of Mr. Perfect and the end of a lot of people. The plane ride from hell is one of the most infamous incidents. I mean, they're shaving. Bradshaw is shaving Michael P.S. Hayes' face. Wrestlers are passed out. They're harassing stewardess. Like the WWE boys were the most unbehaved boys ever in 2000 in that incident in 2002. Yeah, so that's 2002. Going into 2003, we have two champions. Triple H is on his reign of terror. We also have in 2002 the Katie Vick storyline. Triple H feuding with Kane and reveals an aspect of Kane's past about his girlfriend Katie Vick that died, and then they show Kane. This was what Triple H dressed up as Kane having sex with Katie Vick's corpse, one of the more infamous incidents in WWE history. It's just crazy. And Triple H is going to run through all of the former WCW guys that will come in, and one of those guys will face him at WrestleMania 19 which will be our next installment. That will be Booker T. For the World Heavyweight title, Booker T will take on Triple H, and Kurt Angle will take on the 2003 Royal Rumble winner, Brock Lesnar, because Lesnar inevitably loses the championship first to the Big Show. But by the time we get around to the next WrestleMania, it'll be in Kurt Angle's hands. And Kurt Angle and the Big Show, Kurt Angle and Brock Lesnar will have a phenomenal match at WrestleMania 19. So that's the next installment from Safeco Field in Seattle in 2003. Peace, guys. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you, David, for contributing. And yes, I agree with you. WrestleMania 18, one for the ages. 2002 was a very, very eventful year in WWE, a game-changing year for WWE. Love you guys.